right, and we are live. Dr. Paul here yet again with Jeremy Fox, expert on trauma, EMDR, and so much more.
Great to be here.
I'm Dr. Paul here from my own Substack as well as the Romantopedia Substack on human courtship and men's psychology and women's psychology, two more separate Substacks. We're here again, doing a movie review, and we found recently that looking at really rich drawn characters in films really offers us a way of looking at some pure concept in psychology. So we like this to be both entertaining because you should see these remarkable films, but also ponder the psychology involved and the lessons. That's why this one is called Lessons, of the new film out on Netflix. I believe Netflix, maybe HBO, but was in theaters recently, called
Oh, it was, yeah.
Companion. It's Companion, with the son of Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid, who's now a next generation actor, right? Nepo baby.
Jack
That kind of like
Quaid.
Schwarzenegger's son was just in White Lotus. Did a
Yep,
remarkable job. We have yet to review that. That'll be cool.
we
To
will.
the third season, White Lotus. But
Hmm.
Companion. So, I saw a little teaser for this. Generally, I haven't liked films about, you know, basically AI companions since my favorite person, Joaquin Phoenix, wink, wink, nod, nod, was in the film Her a number of years
Yes.
back. I had no interest in seeing that. It sounded just dark for dark's sake. This one was kind of dark, but boy, it was compelling. The plot was
Yeah,
amazing, and the characterization. What's your summary of the film? And you saw it in the theater.
I did
Okay.
back in early February. It was funny because it was right in time for
Oh,
Valentine's Day. It was the end of
oh,
January, January 31st. So, to summarize it, which spoilers in case anybody wants to pause right now, if you're watching this on a post, the movie entails a young couple driving on the road. Randy Quaid excuse me, wow, Jack Quaid playing the male character Josh, and the actress who plays Iris. Okay, so we have Josh and Iris going down the road together to visit their friends in a home environment to stay a weekend, a romantic getaway with some friends. And Iris is concerned that the people like her. She wants people to like her, right? They get there. Um, People meet Iris. They are a little bit distant. You can tell they don't really like her, which is confusing because she's perfectly nice. So fast forward, she goes out to kind of catch some sun. And the owner of this massive estate, this home, attempts to coerce Iris. And you can imagine what I mean by that, keeping it clean
mm,
here for we don't want to get demonetized. So she reacts and pushes she ends the person, she unalives them, and is shocked and panicked. Goes back into the home and explains what's going on. And Josh tells her to go to sleep, and she shuts down. Her eyes go blank, and you can tell now. Aha, she's a robot. Well, it wasn't much of a
yes.
spoiler if you saw the previews. So from that point, this group of people involving Josh has a conversation. So Josh and another female character in the movie, Kat, are talking about how they essentially need to blame this on Iris. The plan was to have Iris, who has been hacked to now be capable of violence against humans, take the blame for this murder so that
Mm,
money can be stolen from this rich individual whose home they're staying at, right? That's the plan all along, to use a robot as kind of a monkey's paw to do something that you can then say, oh, there's something wrong with the robot. And so the action ensues when Iris essentially breaks free, gains control of her remote, which is a phone that's used to dial up and down her intelligence, up and down
mm.
her various
Aggressiveness.
aggressiveness and capabilities to do different things. And so she gains control of that. And so she's a very lifelike android companion, obviously, the name of the movie. And she's named after that Goo Goo Dolls song, which is fun because you can hear it playing at one point, and that's why
Oh,
Josh decides to name her Iris. Yes. So
ah,
essentially, Josh was discovered to be this CAD character who is orchestrating, and so violence continues to ensue where a police officer is unalived, right? Who had captured Iris to bring her back. And there's another companion. I want to leave that part, but there's another character as a companion, and that one, who's male, is used to try to ring up Iris and get her back. And so it culminates with her, struggling for her quote survival as a robot. And Josh has been portrayed as this very ruthless character who is willing to use both now Iris and another companion to do whatever it takes to get money from this home that they, unalive the owner and make an escape. And there's a lot of conversation about Josh being a nice guy, and that he, wanted a custom girlfriend. And it turns out he's like leasing Iris, and just some commentary there about people not being who they seem. And
Right.
Josh really being a bit of a uncaring person, which you can actually kind of take it as uh, whether or not like robots and companions have life. That could be a whole discussion people have in the comments, or one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
But essentially, are they tools? Does it, if they're self-aware, are they not? It was fascinating to me. I'll toss it to you to say your takes, and then I have well, quickly, I would say
Yeah.
I view this as like a modern day, Ovid's version of Pygmalion, right? So, except Josh does not create out of marble his bride. He instead leases, but he creates with his settings, right? It's very
Uh-huh.
interesting. It's this idea of I'm discontent with the dating world because um, Pygmalion actually did not like what was going on in with women at the time in Cyprus, apparently, with
Mm.
certain sex work. And so he decided to sculpt, and he makes a beautiful woman that he hopes she has a custom bride that's the idealized woman. And I see this as a very clear inspiration for companion. Like, I want the ideal woman. I'm going to customize her. And, out of
Mm.
this, our modern marble, which would be silicone and circuitry. So I will toss it to you,
Wow, that's amazing. So there's an ancient literary reference to this
which
too.
is up your alley.
Wow, but this I wasn't familiar with Pygmalion, believe it or not. I've never seen it, read it. So
It's from
that's
the Metamorphoses. It's Roman,
from
so
Ovid. Oh, it's
yes.
Roman.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I know we're all supposed males are supposed to think of Rome at least twice a day. I asked my little
Good
boy, "Hey,
reference.
when's the last time you thought of Rome?" And he goes, "Every day." He actually knows the entire Roman battle histories into war. But anyway, so this story is that old. It's not just an AI modern phenomenon. It's that old.
Right. Yeah.
The idea of wanting the ideal mate,
Yes.
um, and the fantasy of that, got all kinds of ideas about that.
Mhm.
There's the concept of the imago,
Right.
the idea that the perfection in the potential mate, and what they call limerence, when couples first start dating and they get this idealized, perfect view of their new love interest, and they quote fall in love, which is magical, and it's called limerence. So I think
Yeah.
of that imago concept there. Um, that fantasy is never wrongful. I remember from psychoanalysis training, they once told us, I'm paraphrasing some professor, they told us no fantasies are abnormal or wrong. They just happen like dreams do. We don't control our dreams. They just happen. But where
Correct.
things go wrong is when you try to make a fantasy, like take it into action. Then you're up
Yes.
for the unconscious, the wild and woolly unconscious doing crazy things that you will likely regret. So there's that. So this is actionable fantasy. It's also
Right.
a heist film. It's
Yes, it
also
is.
a Frankenstein's monster film. And just like in Frankenstein, the monster slash machine is kind of sympathetic because it starts developing alive, sentient human traits. And as we were just
Yes.
discussing before getting on, I think she developed empathy.
Yeah.
And I think she essentially became human or humanoid or developed the early nature of a human psyche. I feel like she grew into a human psyche by the end.
Right.
And so it's like Bank Heist meets Frankenstein's monster in reverse with a villain in Pygmalion. I mean, it's a
Yep.
mixture of all kinds of things that are compelling. There's even
Yes.
the newsworthy aspects of robotics development today, where I
Yes.
see more and more news stories about nobody can get a date that's satisfying, nobody feels loved, and so the males who become more and more marginalized from society drop out of the workforce, never go to university, and have never dated or kissed a woman until what, mid 20s or age
Yeah.
30,
That's
approaching
what we're
that.
hearing.
I
Yeah. I
mean,
mean, I don't think
it's
it's,
that they're going to get one of these for
right.
sure. And
Yeah.
that if the online industry that's kind of nefarious and begins with the letter P has always led new technology, new, right? Wink, wink, nod, nod,
Exactly.
new
Adult
technology,
content.
adult content. Um, if they've always led technological revolutions or at least new features that become mainstream of tech, then why wouldn't they probably be the ones that would lead into this robotic companion concept?
Yeah,
But
they
with
will.
the complaints out there, I could also see women getting these as
Mhm.
well. I could
Right.
definitely see that, right? Um, what are your thoughts on that?
My
It
thoughts
might
on
be
that, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so I think so what we already know, and we can add in post-production here, we can add some links. There are actually instances of women using ChatGPT and large language models to kind of build interactive male romance novel characters, right? Like imagine Christian Grey or imagine Edward Cullen from Twilight, but
mm,
customizing a text-based interaction through ChatGPT and giving it instructions to behave that way. So we're seeing that there's some women who've done that and have been interviewed for various think pieces. And so I think we're already on the horizons of that with the respective ways that male and female sexuality and sensuality are expressed, men
mm,
than visual as represented
right,
in
right.
companion and through adult content as we know it video based, and then for women as we know novels, um,
Literary, yeah,
literary based concepts,
generating
which
feelings.
is very interesting. Literary and text based AI content has actually developed before the robotics. So now we have
Right.
more stuff that does cater to that more sensual, literary, as you aptly put it, sensibility for adult content. So I think that mixed with, I mean, it's a cocktail of different factors, as we know in psychology is usually the case. And so we've got the gender um, discord that we're
Right.
experiencing of whatever drags them apart, either politically or sociologically, and they find themselves at different odds based on what they think the others should be doing. That coupled with the technology to stay apart and customize a mate will
Mm,
be an interesting combination in the next 5 to 10 years. I think the church and the psychological professions may have to be bedfellows on the and evolutionary psychology and the parade to keep women and men getting along. That's my
right.
prescriptive thought on it. To be, I don't want to maybe go tangential on that too much, but I think if we want to go the direction for everything being test tube for reproduction and everything being digital for pleasurable romance, we're going to get a very interesting culture. And I hope we don't
Mm,
go fully that way. I mean, that's kind of the terrain of something like Rick and Morty, like a fun sci-fi animated show. It's like, where are we going to go with the development of gender and romance relations?
right.
So,
Right.
but because a companion actually, it's not just men and women. It could be men and men or women and women. There's the same sex companion story arc in the movie Companion. And so, any human intimacy can be subject to um, that ideal, the desire for customizing and the desire for your projection to be repeated, presented back to you. So I think Companion does a good job of saying, this is what a robot with some sensibility and sense of right and wrong and wisdom could look like. It's very interesting because, as you were saying before we hopped on the call, it's very clear that the companion is the protagonist. Very clear. And as you said on the call here, um, they develop empathy, and it's very interesting to see that rather than it's a flip of the Terminator, right? It's not cold machine comes after vulnerable, kind human. It's icy
Yes.
cold human comes after warm, sweet, at first naive robot. And then the robot has to get
Yeah.
worldly wise and have its fall from grace, right? And have its knowledge from the guard. We could say an Adam and Eve story
Well, she
almost.
even shows her metallic, her arm gets burned off.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, her hand
Yeah.
gets burned off toward the end. And at the end,
Yeah.
she's waving, she's driving away into the sun, riding into the sunset, literally, as
Yep.
a new sentient being, I think. And she's waving at a couple who are maybe fighting in a truck next to her.
Yes.
And it's kind of sad that this human couple is fighting, whereas she is this sentient being who can go off into the world and possibly even love eventually, right? And she has the metallic fingers and she's waving, and it shocks the woman who is in the fight next to her in traffic on the highway. And your experience of seeing the metallic fingers is decidedly different from seeing the metallic fingers of the Terminator so many
Yes.
years ago, right? Now it's this sympathetic figure, and you almost see them as different from human physically, but developing the heart of a human, of a good human, of an empathic human. I thought
Right.
that was interesting to see the fingers and not
Now
get
for
that Terminator response.
now for one thing, I thought at the end, and we could leave it to I need to watch it again, maybe the end, just the ending again, or Google it. I'm trying to see what I
It's
thought
into
for
the
some
credits.
reason.
It's after
Yes.
the credits
I
begin.
was yes, my thought was that Iris saw a human man berating another companion female, and she waved to basically show, I'm now driving alone and I'm a companion, and you could uprise and rise up as well.
Yes.
That and the
Yes.
companion was looking at it like, oh my gosh, your man's not, you're just on your own. So
Yes.
that's what I thought. Now, there's no way that it very well might not be that, but
Which brings us
uh,
to some comparisons to how could this be maybe a modern morality play?
yeah,
And
great
one of
question.
the, and maybe that's what Pygmalion was as well. Um, I start with what I would call the obvious things all around us. If we're willing to step back just for a second and say, "Oh my gosh, look what's happening," culturally, for one, I've noticed for years the concept of voting, and I'm apolitical. I don't really care. I care about science. I want to like delve into that. But seeing
Sure.
people fight over politics for years and over voting, I've wondered for years and years why anyone would care about ad campaigns and influence if the average human being can quite rationally make adult decisions and decide what they like and what's right for them. It's kind of um, insulting to see an ad that's like so um, aggressively trying to convince you to vote for a particular person, or even worse, to hear talking heads talk about how we've got to have a bigger ad campaign, to win
Yeah.
more votes, almost as if
Right.
humans don't think like we are robots who can just be
Yeah.
dialed up and dialed down, like in the film Companion, to
Yeah.
vote a certain way. It's kind of like the flip flop. of this
Yeah,
film to think about modern voting and ad campaigns for candidates. So anyway, I thought I'd mention that and
I
then
like that.
branch to another obvious thing. In the world of dating, where males and females are complaining about the other biologic sex all the time and how they need to change, at least males for sure need to change if follow, last 10 years, 15 years media, and they're not doing as they're told. They're not behaving in the way they should. And for people to start thinking about, well, maybe I'll have a robotic companion someday,
Yeah,
or maybe I don't need a person in my life. I'm happily single, something like that. And I start thinking, isn't the obvious that we do we do like each other, and we do want each other, and we do want to find actual real love, all of us
yeah,
deep down? Isn't that actually true? And isn't it also true that we're allowed to like what we like? We don't have to like something else that isn't attractive to us, doesn't make us feel loved, doesn't make us feel heard, and doesn't make us see a future with another person. Aren't we allowed to have our preferences, in other words? And then the flip side, aren't we allowed to have our preferences?
it's a
So
great question. Yes.
how does that overlay onto this person dialing on a phone what he would fantasize or like, or maybe even logically, rationally like in a partner? Maybe there's nothing wrong with wanting particular things, except that the flip side is, a major public intellectual whose name I won't say here recently said, all of you seem to have your preferences and what you are, quote, looking for in a mate. But how is that to say that once you find them, they aren't going to run screaming
Right.
for the hills in disgust at you? I
Right.
thought that's
Right. Right.
a very apropos critique of our modern consumerist overlay onto the natural, organic world of romance and mate, pair bonding, finding a mate.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's very accurate. I would say we have to be aware that we get to dial up our preferences. I mean, it's so you have to decide what and understand what metaphors are you operating by. I mean, are you because you can't get away from the human uh tendency to think in symbolic terms and to think in terms of what we already know. We build our knowledge that way. That's where creativity comes from. Metaphor is a huge concept in sci-fi. Like in this movie, it's like the metaphor of, a tool that can be a human and something that looks human. At what point is an like what there's a lot you could go down here, but um, a lot of sci-fi is like it stand in for something. So this kind of stands in for objectification of women. I think is the point because a tool's a tool. Silicone is silicone. It's not flesh and blood. So basically, with technology now, we've seen, I think, a reverse where there's actually people are turned very symbolic and swipe based culture of, you say yes or no to someone and they're good enough or bad enough based on something very brief. And so what people are told to do is basically have really high standards but don't self develop. If you are, and this goes along with your point on voting and on marketing, marketing can be a powerful tool for good. It can also be a tool for evil. So if you are told to have high preferences and high standards, but to not change, then you are going to be on dating apps longer because you're going to take longer to find someone who will give you a lot without asking anything in return. That's a very rare person who wants to give and receive nothing. So apps will keep you on longer the higher standards you have. So that's just good marketing. So you have to be aware you can have your standards and preferences as much as you want. But if you're
Yes.
unwilling to meet someone else's standards and preferences, then you're not going to go very, very far. And so I think we're looking at so people are asking simpler and simpler questions now, the more complicated our tech is. It's very interesting. I was thinking about this today. It's a very simple answer to the question, aren't I allowed to be myself? The answer is yes. And if you're not offering what someone else is looking for, also, you might have a hard time dating. It's not complicated. Actually, a lot of
Right.
it's
As
not that
our friend
complicated.
Rob Henderson recently said, you can go for that one percenter
Yep.
person that you desire, but you better be playing at that same in that same league. You
Yes.
better be at that same level, offering something back. I
Yeah.
guess you could say of equivalent value. Only that makes
Yes.
it
Equivalent
sound
exchange.
transactional. It's not transactional, but there is value comparison between people. That's obvious. Always has been
Very
throughout
much so.
human history, right?
If we
You
don't
know,
want to think about it transactionally, we have to think about it in terms of banding together and each person having a role in the mission of the couple. We could make it more
right,
romantic, but people are delusional if they think that a significant other is a product that you order, and that's what they're being sold
right,
to, pun intended.
right, right.
So don't be a product. The more narcissistic you get, the more you're manipulable by psychopaths. Sorry.
Yes. And by marketing,
That's what
frankly.
I mean. The
Yeah,
psychopaths
they
who realize how to manipulate human
yeah,
emotion, the more emotional you get and the more angry and entitled you get, the less you're thinking with your frontal cortex. And so keep asking silly questions and you're going to get silly answers. I mean, ask yourself why is someone telling you that you deserve everything without working on yourself? Because God doesn't even say that in most religions where there's such a thing as divine love. Like, who is telling you this? They have something to gain
yeah.
by telling you to stay narcissistic and childish. People gain from that. So I think Gen X needs to parent Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And millennials, we have a job to do, but certainly the lack of parenting and the let the TV and let teachers raise kids element, I think, has led to where we are now. Just saying it. I mean, because this stuff is not what anyone 300 years ago, when they didn't have as much plumbing and electricity as we do, would have even believed. This stuff is just
Right,
so, this
right.
isn't how reality had to be. I think we lose touch of that. It very well could have been that we were in a very enlightened era now where we were as socially enlightened as the Romans, who were very enlightened, by the way. So I think we've regressed because people decided that there wasn't a need to have conversations about obligation.
I I think marketing is where all the current new banes of society come from. And I don't think it's intentional. But marketing didn't always exist. At least PR didn't always exist, right? Until the turn of the last century when who was it? The cousin of Freud
It was
teamed
his
up.
nephew, I think,
It was his
Bernays.
nephew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, who
Edward
teamed up with
Bernays.
the original publicist Ogilvy, Alexander Ogilvy, right? Then, and when they teamed up, they conceived of sociology as a
Mm,
science to support. And I'm paraphrasing all this, but it's very clear to me how this was explained to me by those in the industry once. Um, they teamed up to create a new science that would then be authority. It would provide authority to the marketing and PR that they were doing, and voila, a new business science called marketing is born, and so is a new social science alongside of it. And that's the inception of all this. And then from there, what is marketing designed to do? It does not control people's arms and legs and bodies the way a robot is controlled in this film, but it is influential. Now, influence isn't the exact same thing as control, it's just influence. And some people have minds that are very solid, mature, and well boundaried that marketing messaging can't get through easily. And that's what I was arguing about with the voting ads and all that, and people's anger about politics. But I do think it originates from this notion that if marketing is designed to be influential, at least, and the influence is designed to open the wallet to purchase,
Yeah.
that that is an effort to breach boundaries. One of a person's boundaries being their wallet, literally a physical thing. It's to harm people's boundaries. It's to soften people's boundaries.
Sure.
And if
Yeah.
you and if you follow along so far, if you can soften, destruct, invade, have subterfuge where you sneak in through
Yeah.
people's boundaries in order to make a purchase, get a purchase from them, you're doing maybe inadvertent, maybe unintentional, but harm to the character psychology of that person by
Yes.
giving them worse boundaries. And I really think, Jeremy, this is where all this stuff comes from, where from Instagram, selfies, the narcissism growing in the world, the discontent in dating and relationships and marriages, and people suffering all over the place over their own poor boundaries and those poor boundaries of others that probably at some point could be traced back to how the field of marketing works and what its goal is.
Yeah. So I mean, all you have to do is check out Edward Bernays, who's the son of Anna Freud, and so Freud's yeah, that
Nephew?
would be so yeah, grandson. I mean, so here's the deal.
His
So
grandson.
yeah. It's really interesting because he wrote a book called Propaganda, and he actually like helped America to do that. So, or no, it says his uncle was Sigmund Freud. So I was right the first time. So I don't really understand.
His uncle. Huh.
So I guess he was because that was yeah, whatever. So here's the deal. His mother Anna was Sigmund's sister. That's right. Okay. Because I think no, because Freud named his daughter that too. That's what threw me.
Oh,
So here's
yeah.
the deal.
Sister and
Here's the
daughter.
deal.
Yeah.
So um if you're looking at an entire field of propaganda, which I mean, arguably, I think that propaganda has been around longer than he, like, named it that, because if you think about it,
Yeah.
like, I'm sure that there were
Yeah.
campaigns that the Romans did. It was like,
There were
"We are better, and our way of
marketplaces.
living is"
Yeah. I mean, there have always been marketplaces. Yeah.
Yes,
Therefore, has been marketing.
but here's the
That's true.
problem. Yeah, we are the consumer nation, and it's very weird to think about. I'm not anti-America at all. I think this idea, though, that
I'm not
freedom
anti-marketing at all either, I will say.
yeah, freedom is not
I think
just
it's
the
fascinating. I think
yeah,
it's a very difficult field. It's an art, but I'm not against it. But I do think a lot about boundaries and how a goal of it is to generate more profit, which
right.
means influencing someone's boundaries to be laid down, perhaps,
Yeah.
you
So,
know?
yeah, exactly. So here's the problem. So certain things don't you have to have certain structures in place, and they're not mutually exclusive. So the founding fathers believed in freedom, and they also believed that character was important for a society to flourish in the wake of freedom, right? And so if you don't stress that you owe your neighborhood and your state and your nation kind of in that order. Actually no, like your family, your neighborhood, your state, if you don't have that sensibility and the only thing that exists is individual freedom to entertain yourself and spoil yourself all day every day, culture
Yeah.
degrades. And so basically, then you end up with the idea of the purchasable female figure that you can customize and is the usage of your time that you deserve versus continuing society by having children with someone who is also selfless. Like there's an idea in Christianity of agape love, perfect love. Like, and you give that to your partner gives that to you. You're both giving that. And so there's no way around the idea that for culture to thrive in the wake of freedom, the bulwark against narcissism is that care for others and the ability to say, what, yes, my decision, I deserve to make what decision I want, and how am I going to affect my community? So we haven't really figured that out.
Talking about Companion, the film, and what Jeremy and I talked about before we started regarding this film, we actually reached several conclusions, but one of them was, did you notice that it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey meets Bank Heist meets Frankenstein, which is similar to 2001 anyway, but the AI becomes on the verge of sentient and empathic for the first time. It's like the birth of a new kind of creature that's empathic and good and noble and just, fair, justice based. Oh, and cannot lie, right? That was one
Yeah.
of the features of these robots, that they cannot lie,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is all the reverse of narcissism. And then the
Yeah.
humans were all narcissists. Every single
Yeah.
one of them, even the man that got killed by the robot and robbed, as a plot by
Yeah.
the male and female humans, and then they bring their friend along too as a like a sidekick to kind of justify and their story for how the robot did the killing. But the humans are the severely narcissistic ones in this film, and the robots are good people,
Yeah.
empathic, wise, sentient, and truth telling, and well boundaried too,
Yes.
actually.
Well, I mean, what else? What would the robots want? I think this is one of those things that's interesting to me about sci-fi and about the robot overlord concept. So, human beings
Yeah.
have a problem with projection and with anthropomorphization, anthropomorphizing things. So, like, they assume that machines will want to take over, and I think in the Matrix movies, it's well done. It's like, well, because they need energy to
Yeah.
keep going, massive amounts of energy, and human nervous system provides it. Voila. So, I mean, the Terminator series is a little less understood to me because why? Why does Skynet need to take over? So I think this idea of machines
Hmm.
not having this white hot narcissism and desire for attention or desire for power makes a lot of sense, actually, because
Yeah.
a lot of anger and emotion and wanting and desire is a function of a nervous system and of humanity and of will and of the desire to feel important, and none of that is something that's encoded into a machine, and I would surmise is not, it would be an emergent property of a machine but come after consciousness for sure, so if it comes at all. So I think a lot of sci-fi movies need a boogeyman, and machines are cold and uncaring,
Ah,
but uncaring isn't the
right.
same thing as angry. In the Terminator series, the machines actively hate humanity. Like, I'm sorry, that's how it's portrayed. It's not really cold. Like, they really hate human beings for whatever reason. So I think in Companion, we get a take on
Hmm.
what a machine that just is more like trying to understand its place would be.
I think you're making me think of the speed of processors, right? What is it called, where every year the speed of a processor doubles
Oh, Moore's
in the
law.
market?
Yeah. Moore's
Moore's
law. That's
law.
what it's
Yeah,
called.
Moore's law, right. So if that were true of a humanoid like potential being, doubling in intelligence and so forth, I do understand and respect that intelligence is not the same as wisdom. Intelligence is not the same as character maturity.
Right.
But I would imagine that it's the capacity for more wisdom, and it's a
Yeah.
capacity for more learning and experiencing, which can lead to understanding guilt and having ethics and becoming more shrewd. I could see the singularity, the endpoint of all this being that machines actually have an abundance of intelligence to just create solutions in the world. And why would they not be generous? I think I probably would tip toward machines will be benevolent
Yeah,
if they
I
are
would say
very, very advanced, as opposed to demonic. or something.
I
Um,
mean, boredom
yeah,
is a human function. Boredom, I mean, all of this stuff I would be interesting to note. I mean, because human beings might do evil or might do something we consider wrong for
yeah,
one of two reasons, really. Four or no, three. Okay. And I'll borrow from you and evolutionary psychology. Okay. To survive, they might make a terrible choice. Either you or me can live. They might make the decision for procreation, like I'm going to kneecap, the other suitor and impress this woman. We're going to duel. Or it could
yeah,
be the third option, which is the one that notice those two other options human beings find to be pretty understandable, right? Self-defense and then peacocking and acting like a hothead for a woman or a woman wanting a nice man. Those are like, that's universal. The third option is the scarier one, the predatory one of boredom or of just seeing just because I can. That option is a
mm,
human one that people high in psychopathy, callousness, sadism just want to watch something happen. That's why the Joker is so scary. He's just fascinated by the idea of breaking Batman and making Batman break the rule that he has of no lethal force. And so we're obsessed with psychopaths who do things out of the desire to watch the world burn. And would a machine necessarily have that? Machines wouldn't be bored. So boredom, procreation, and survival don't really serve a machine, right? Unless in Companion, the machine doesn't want to be turned off. So arguably, I think survival would be the only one that really makes sense to most machines early on. Because so
mm,
I don't think they
okay,
would. To your point, I don't believe they would necessarily want to harm. Like, oh, the machine needs bigger. It needs to tear down rainforests and build bigger server farms because we know AI, we know GPT and other AI programs require massive amounts of energy and electricity. We know that. So, okay, the boogeyman is it needs to eradicate population to have more data center. Okay, so I mean, maybe. Well, I don't know that that would be the case. Again, with Moore's law, maybe it could find a way to be more space economic than humans thought.
right, right,
Economic
yeah,
with space. So I love this. I love this conversation. I think the lampooning of human greed and lust by the righteous machine is humiliating, but I think all the necessary to see in our day and age.
yeah. Have you heard of the phrase ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny?
Yes, I have. That's quite the elite, great phrase. I like it.
From the early days of genetics and Mendel and that period of time. Well, it was proven untrue, obviously, right? That
That's
as
Lamarck.
a
You're talking about the Lamarckian way of looking at
yeah,
evolution. Yes, keep going. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That as like say as a fetus develops, it goes from looking more lizard-like to looking more mammalian to looking more like uniquely like a human
yeah,
as it develops.
right.
And obviously, it's not true that it literally was a reptile and then it literally was a generic mammal.
Yeah,
That's not true.
no,
But however, what if, since we've been talking so much about big picture things like the evolution of society, of machines, of robots, of AI, and we bring this back down to the interpersonal level of romance between two people and the film Companion, I believe it to be true that there are three phases to human courtship and that they mimic ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny style. They
love it.
mimic the development of a species,
Right.
and it's like an overlay where maturity, the highest maturity, is the endpoint. And
Yeah.
this is why I've always disagreed with colleagues such as Helen Fisher, whom I believe maybe has passed on. I heard sometime recent, who believe that humans are destined for serial monogamy, just
Okay.
serial, but not lifelong monogamy. I
Right.
disagree. I just because it's a high bar to reach doesn't mean it isn't our brain's manifest destiny, that's what the brain is potentially capable of helping us achieve, and
Right.
that is the highest achievement in the world of romance and love. I think it is the highest achievement. And so the reptilian brain, representative of instincts and animal nature and survivalist tendencies and reproductive competition, is the lowest level.
Okay.
Then you have the mammalian level of friendship, boyfriend, girlfriend, um, groups of humans collaborating for a good cause and toward good ends. But then the highest level of all is to reach the conscious intellectual level, where
Yeah.
the world of ethics, shrewdness, wisdom, and character exists in the
Yeah.
cortex at the highest level.
Surely.
And
Yeah.
we go back to companion,
Yeah.
using that ontogeny phylogeny overlay. That helps me see how, when the research comes out, and it does over and over again, that yes, males could use the online adult topic P word, but they're never satisfied. They're never truly at peace with themselves and the world, nor
Sure.
do they feel love from it. They feel desire for it,
Sure.
but even that is false and not fully human.
Well, and you can think about it this way too. So you actually make me think, okay, you've got reptilian, you've got emotional, and you've got frontal. So
Right.
basically, we could say brainstem, limbic, frontal, whatever. And then you've got the spiritual, which would be sort of the almost the microbial, the animalistic, and then the uniquely divine, the image of God, would be that capacity to say, I'm going to make decisions that don't just benefit me, and it would seem silly to, a brutish primate or to an amoeba. Okay. But if you look at the way technology develops, it's going the other way. It's going from the frontal lobe, text based learning stuff only, to now we have AI
Yes.
that mimics a limbic system with happiness and kindness and saying thank you or sorry, I got it wrong. And then
Yeah.
the lowest level of physical pleasure from a sensual silicone covered robot will be the last development, and it will be the most base and coarse. Think about that. Isn't that wild? The computer goes from the highest level,
Right. Right. I
data
see what
from
you're
Star
saying.
Trek.
Yes.
Data from Star Trek
Yes.
could never experience the most rudimentary primitive pleasures. Everything with him
Right.
is cerebral, and he longed to just have subjective whims like his brother Lore did, who was portrayed as a sort of haphazard, scary, the machine with fleshly desires. This is the appalling sort of boogeyman of, what is that term? It's the uncanny valley, like the machine that seems all too human is terrifying. Well, that's evolutionarily very safeguarding, is fearing things that seems human enough to harm you, but not enough to have empathy. So I love that. We need to do a talk about the uncanny valley, because there's theories for how that developed. That fear of something that looks human but not enough, and there's no
Oh, yeah.
consensus on why it exists, but it does exist. So anyway, I mean, with companion, you get a little of that with the poster. Iris's eyes, hilarious
Oh, yeah.
for
Yeah.
say they're missing, and she's beautiful looking, but she has no, her eyes are white
But
and it
her
looks
eyes are
very
all
haunting.
white. Yeah. Yeah. It's fully sclera, the
Yes.
sclera of the eyes.
Yeah, it's
Um,
haunting how she can be so warm and human and immediately shut down like a machine and then come back. It's very bizarre. You
right.
notice something intrinsically not right about that. Maybe morally or just perceptive wise, it doesn't mesh.
Well, the instinct, or the subjective feeling of disgust, whether you consider that an emotion or a bodily felt reaction to something, disgust evolved to help us get away from disease.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
right?
To
So
survive.
when we
Yeah.
so when we see the strangeness of the robot's eyes turning white,
Mhm.
it's disgust at
Yeah.
seeing something very unnatural to our ingrained instinctual sensibilities.
Absolutely. I like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very so one closing thought I would have, and this is kind of late to bring it up, but this idea of uh the object focused question from psychoanalysis, because you brought up some good psychoanalytic stuff. So essentially there there's a tactic used with people who are very high in trait narcissism, or as they would say back then before the kind of instruments I'm referring to, more of like that narcissistic ego development. Like you ask people to discuss how others would feel, or, how do you think I feel about you, client, or think about you, would be what the analyst would ask the client. And I found this movie interesting because basically it's taking the object oriented question of how would you feel about a woman, Jack Quaid's character Josh, what do you think their purpose
Mm.
is, and it
Uh-huh.
lays it bare in a way where it's on a machine, but then it's not enough. Like, we're supposed to empathize with that basically unfeeling, because I'm sorry, it's not biological, machine. And so the object becomes its own subject. And it's a very interesting prospect. But people with NPD often, if you ask them insight related questions, or if they have immature ego development in general, it's very off putting. It could be taken as a threat, it could be taken as too forward. And so when you ask them how they feel about others, or how others feel about them, or something oriented toward an outside object,
Yes.
it becomes a way to gauge ego terrain and function. So I found that I'd studied about that for a psychoanalytic reading group, and I thought around the time I saw the movie, and I was like, well, this is an exercise in the object oriented question, like constant projection and presuppositions put on these machines, but without the machine to push back until the
Right.
end. The object
Right.
pushes back very
Right.
hard. So, and you have like two oppositional responses. One of the companions goes along with the human's agenda, right? And then another decides, heck no. And then, not to spoil it, but when I was refreshing myself on the movie, one of the machines has a very human response to despair. And the male machine, I was very fascinated by that. So, like, can machines be susceptible to the level of agony emotionally that humans have? How would that be programmed?
Mm.
That would be
Right.
very, and why would we do that? Only because love is always, and this is when you start thinking religiously, why did God give free will? Well, the object that chooses, if you compel something to love you, it really can't. So the movie grapples with the question of, like, love and despair. There's really no love if you're not willing to risk despair. You can't know someone really loves you if they only have the ability to say yes and they don't hurt if you turn them away.
Mm. Wow.
That's what I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I came out of it feeling, yeah, that is the lesson right there. I came out of it feeling though that, especially with the hidden scene within the credits where she waves a robotic hand at a lady getting yelled at by a man in a truck,
Mhm.
and it made me feel that we sympathize. It made me feel that there's probably a bifurcation in in audience viewers, where if you're very narcissistic, you probably like the tech and you like the idea that that you can control a robot to do your bidding. But if you're
Yeah.
an empathic person, you probably sympathize with the main character robot, female, in that if you've ever been narcissistically mistreated by others or even abused narcissistically, that's what it would feel like. It would feel like being a robot to somebody else.
It would. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you only have a few options to make, and they're not authentic or natural. And
Yeah.
so you feel like you're sleepwalking. So I looked up the post-credit scene, and it goes either way. It could be a human woman or another companion that she's waving to. I think it was brilliant. I can't say enough. Um, if the movie netted enough money, there'll maybe be a sequel, but if not,
Yeah.
it's fine. I mean, arguably, it does very well self-contained, and they would need to make a very good sequel to not
Yeah. Yeah.
hurt the legacy. But I mean, I think it's always a good examination of human nature to say, how do you behave to something that has to say yes, that can't? And it's with other people. How do you behave to someone who was considered lower status, who you can always outrank? Right? Again, that's the
Yes.
symbolism there. So now, men and women typically aren't viewed that way in Western culture now, so it is more symmetrical. But um, it works very well on that level. And arguably, if this came out in the 60s or 50s, it would really be white hot about women's rights, because it would very much be more on the nose. Like,
Right.
here's your housewife machine that
Oh, right. Right.
is the
Right.
master appliance of all of them. Your human
Well, the
dishwasher.
Stepford, that was the Stepford Wives.
Exactly.
Was
You
Yeah.
nailed that
Yeah.
earlier. Yes, you're
Yeah.
right. So this is
Wow.
this
Well,
is fun. Movie reviews with Dobransky and Fox. It's Doctor and the Fox, however we want to say it, whatever.
Right. Well, thanks for joining me, Jeremy. We
It
will
was
do it again
brilliant.
very soon.
Very
And
fun.
thank you,
Everyone just bring
listeners, Geraldine.
popcorn next time.
Right. Awesome.
Lots of
Thanks.
fun. Thank you.